We often talk about the great Khans, sultans, and leaders of Turkic history on this channel. Bumin, Istemi, Bilka Khan, Timur, Mehmet, Ataturk, all men with interesting backgrounds, hard-fought battles, and fascinating accomplishments.
But aside from men, there were also many women that were important for Turkic history. Women who most of the time get overlooked in both Turkish media and global academia. It would be unfair to ignore their story.
Therefore, in this video, we are going to take a look at the role of the woman in Turkic countries, from the very early days as nomads in Central Asia to their current situation in modern-day Turkey. We are also going to explore women's rights and duties as well as several examples of strong Turkic women. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so that you won't miss any updates. With that being said, let's take a look at the role and importance of women in Turkic societies.
They became power, rulers.
Ohne sie findet man keine wahre Freiheit.
Let's start at the very beginning and go back in time a few thousand years. The ancient Turkic peoples were organized in nomadic pastoralist societies, which existed in Central Asia and the Eurasian steppes from around 1200 BC until the 12th century AD. Women played an important role in these societies, although the specifics of their role varied depending on the time period and region. One of the most notable aspects of the role of women in ancient Turkic societies was their involvement in warfare. Although men were primarily responsible for fighting, women played a supporting role by accompanying men to battle, providing supplies, and nursing the wounded. In some cases, women even fought alongside men on the battlefield. For example, the 6th century Göktürk Khaganate, founded by the brothers Bumin and Istemi, was known to have female warriors who fought on horseback using bows and arrows. Another important aspect of women's role was their involvement in domestic life. Women were responsible for the care of children, the preparation of food, and the management of household affairs. They also played an important role in the socialization of children, passing down cultural values and traditions. Furthermore, we know of their economic roles. The Turkic woman was involved in the production of textiles and clothing, which were essential for the survival of the nomadic lifestyle. She was also involved in trade, both within her own society and with neighboring communities. She was often the one responsible for selling goods in the markets and negotiating prices.
Religion was also an important aspect of the role of women in ancient Turkic societies. Tengrism was the dominant religion among the ancient Turks, and women played a prominent role in shamanistic rituals. Women shamans, known as Udagan or Kam, were believed to have special powers, and were consulted for healing, divination, and other spiritual matters. Even as the Kam had already lost political relevance among the Göktürks, he, or more often she, still played a significant role among the non-centralized Turkic peoples after the 6th century. The main task of healing was explained by the magical powers of the Kam. But from what did the Kam draw its energy? At some point, the Kam came to be divided into two groups. Some used the energy they drew from the souls in the afterlife, literally from the sky. These people were called White Kam. The other group, on the other hand, sought to connect to the underworld, to Erlik's domain, to draw energy. They were called Black Kam. So there were white and black, or light and dark shamans among the Turks. In pre-Islamic Turkish societies, women's roles were further viewed as not misogynistic. There are written sources, laws, and evidence of women having authority in the government. Monogamy was the typical marriage type, and polygamy was not seen as common. Marriage in between a family were strictly forbidden until at least 7 generations had passed, with marriages happening, for example, between a widow and her nephew, who had just become chieftain or ruler, solely for the purpose of saving the widow from falling down the social ladder. Comparing the position of women in early Turkic societies to China is complex, as the role of women varied widely across different regions and time periods. However, in general, women in medieval China faced significant social and legal restrictions, including foot binding, arranged marriages, and limited access to education and political power. The Chinese even made fun several times of the fact that women in the Turkic north had much more say in societal issues than in China. Therefore, it can be said that women in early Turkic societies had more opportunities for economic and cultural participation compared to the position of women in medieval China. Overall, the role of women in ancient Turkic societies was multifaceted and varied depending on the time period and region. While men were primarily responsible for warfare and leadership, women played important roles in domestic life, economic activities, and religious practices.
The role of women changed significantly over time, especially with the influence of outside cultures and political changes. In general, the status of women declined. With the spread of Islam, women's roles in Turkic societies became more restricted. Islamic law emphasized gender segregation, and women's roles became more focused on domestic life and child-rearing. Women were expected to cover their heads and bodies, and their mobility outside of the home was being increasingly limited. Women's roles were even more restricted in the Ottoman Empire than in earlier Turkic societies. Women at the Sultan's court were largely confined to the harem, where they were kept separate from men and were expected to devote themselves to domestic duties. Women had little access to education or other opportunities outside of their home. Notwithstanding these structural changes that took place over several centuries, they did not pass overnight. There are many women across all of Turkic history that can be deemed as powerful and important within their time eras and societies. This includes some powerful women in the Ottoman Empire, who were, however, not of Turkic origin. Due to the sheer mass of examples available, we are going to focus not on the most well-known, and instead on those women who barely receive attention, but whose stories deserve to be told. Empress Ashina. This was a legendary woman warrior from the Turkic Khaganate in the 7th century. Being the daughter of Mukan Khagan and thereby granddaughter of the legendary Bumin, she was part of a marriage with the emperor of the Chinese Zhou dynasty. The Zhou and their predecessors, the Wei, had helped out the Göktürks in the latter's quest to get rid of the Ruran and establish Turkic rule over Mongolia. To seal their alliance once and for all, Mukan gave the Chinese emperor his daughter, who became known as Empress Ashina. At the court in Chang'an, the 16-year-old beautiful woman was so respected that when the Sui dynasty overthrew the Zhou and killed all of the Zhou court members, their grave was rediscovered in 1993 in the area of the Uyghurs in China, and her remains have proved to be valuable for genetic research about the origins of the Ashina dynasty. Her personal name, though, is unknown and forever lost to the cruel flow of time.
Terken Hatun, born in 1053 within the Turkish Karakanid Empire in Central Asia to Tamgach Khan. Terken was married to Malik Shah, the son of Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan, at the age of 12, with Malik being at the same age. In adulthood, this couple had 6 children, including 1 daughter. As the chief consultant of the Turkish Seljuk Empire, Nizam al-Mulk became more and more powerful and influential upon Malik Shah, and the members of the Seljuk dynasty became increasingly frustrated. Terken Hatun's household became the focus of opposition. Nizam denounced her as malevolent influence at the court. But when Terken's husband, Malik Shah, having reigned over the empire for 2 decades, died in 1092, a battle for control over the empire broke out. Terken had openly accused Nizam of trying to divide the empire among his sons. He was assassinated shortly before Malik's demise. With this opponent out of the way, Taj al-Mulk, another prominent advisor but related to Nizam only in name, nominated Mahmud, a son of Malik and Terken, to become new sultan. Terken supported this notion, but in reality wished to seize power upon his name as he was only a child. Terken met with the Caliph of the Abbasids, al-Muqtadi, to secure her rule. He accepted her request to govern by herself, but only if she accepted to be assisted by a vizier appointed by him to keep her at bay. Terken was forced to accept. Henceforth, Terken Hatun was openly recognized as the ruler of the Seljuk Empire, manager of the institutions and political and military business of the state, otherwise the privilege of a male ruler, and the phrase "Khatun dispatched the armies to fight" was often named, illustrating her authority to command the military issues of the state. As unrest upon a group of Mamluk soldiers grew, she tried to quell it, but died suddenly in the city of Isfahan in 1094. Aged 39, Terken had been an influential figure in the Seljuk Empire. Although as her reign only lasted 2 years, She can be seen as one of the most important women in Turkish political history.
Sara Hatun. This woman is barely talked about in discussions about important women, but she might be one of the most capable of them all. Sara was both of the dynasty Komnenos in Trebizond and the Turkmen Akkoyunlu in Diyarbakir. When her son, Uzun Hasan, became new ruler of the Akkoyunlu, he massively expanded the territory of the realm. Under his rule, the principality became an empire that stretched from Anatolia to Iran, from Georgia to Iraq. But behind the scenes, Sara was the most influential person within the state apparatus. During Uzun Hasan's conflicts, his mother traveled to the lands of the Timurids, the Mamluk Sultanate, and the Ottoman Empire in diplomatic missions. Sara Hatun came to have great political influence during his reign. She was a skillful diplomat and headed embassies for the purpose of regulating disputed issues. Thus, she became well known in the West, and foreign ambassadors frequently took advantage of her influence over her son. Sara Hatun's negotiations with the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II were particularly successful. Negotiations took place in 1461, during Mehmed's Anatolian campaign. The Ottoman army captured Sinop and headed towards Trebizond. Fearing that Mehmed was planning an attack on the Akkoyunlu, Uzun Hasan sent his mother to negotiate, accompanied by many sheikhs and princes from the region and expensive gifts. During the negotiations, she referred to Mehmed as my son, while he referred to her as mother. Sara Hatun tried to persuade Mehmed to not capture Trebizond, as it was the land of her daughter-in-law, Despina Hatun, Uzun Hasan's wife. Mehmed, on the other hand, was not inclined to deviate from his plans. As a result, Sara Hatun made an agreement with Uzun Hasan not to interfere with the Ottoman Turks' capture of Trebizond. Despite her gracious reception, Mehmed refused to let her return with his men and detained her until the end of the campaign. Sara was then given piles of jewelry captured by the Ottomans in Trebizond in exchange for her mediation efforts. Sara may have granted asylum to the last emperor of Trebizond, David, and his family for a brief period after Trebizond's capture. 2 years later, however, David was charged with treason and executed alongside his son. The reason for David's execution was his correspondence with his niece, Uzun Hasan's wife, Despina Hatun. Mehmed had likely feared a secret arrangement between his guests at court and the Akkoyunlu ruler. Sara died in 1465, just 2 years too early to witness her son's rise from local ruler to emperor, as Uzun Hasan expanded the Akkoyunlu territory massively within just 2 years, completely eradicating his historical rival Jahanshah and his Kara-Koyunlu Empire in the east. As Azerbaijan officially recognizes the Akkoyunlu to having been a historical predecessor to its modern state, Sara Hatun has been commemorated as being the first Azerbaijani diplomat on the world state. Although in reality Sara was of mixed Turkish Pontic descent, and the Akkoyunlu were a Turkish dynasty originating from eastern Anatolia and not Azerbaijan. Nonetheless, Sara is certainly to be commemorated upon her accomplishments as a diplomat and advisor, and should be remembered as one of the most capable Turkish women in history. And as an interesting tidbit of historical trivia, one should look up her family tree, as Sara in total had 8 children, with her only daughter being Khadija Beyim Khatun. She married Sheikh Junaid of Safavid dynasty by 1459. Their son Haydar married his cousin Halime Khatun, daughter of Uzun Hasan, and Despina Khatun. Halime was the mother of Ismail I, the founder of the Safavid Persian Empire and first Persian Shah since the last days of the Sassanid Empire in the 7th century.
Kara Fatma, born Fatma Seher Erden. She was a Turkish woman who gained prominence as a military officer and a war heroine during the early 20th century. Born in Erzurum in 1855, she witnessed the last decades of the Ottoman Empire. Her husband died during the Caucasus campaign in the First World War. In 1919, she traveled to the city of Sivas in eastern Anatolia, where a congress was held by Mustafa Kemal Pasha. Seeing how many eligible men had already fallen in the Great War, Fatma then requested to be enlisted in the army of the Turkish national movement. After Mustafa Kemal's approval, she formed a militia group. There were 43 women in addition to 700 men under her command. Fatma was taken prisoner twice by the Greek army. During her imprisonment, she was taken to the headquarters of General Nikolaos Trikoupis, where the general spoke to her. She managed to escape from the prison soon afterwards. Fatma then fought at both the Izmit-Bursa and Izmir fronts. Her unit was one of the first to enter Izmir during the liberation from the Greeks on the 9th of September 1922. Her unit controlled Karşıyaka, north of Izmir Gulf. This strong Turkish woman had began her military career as a corporal and ended it as a first lieutenant. She retired and donated her pension to the Turkish Red Crescent, fading almost completely away from public memory until 1933, when a journalist found her living in poverty in a former Russian monastery in Istanbul with her grandchild. In 1944, she published her memoirs and was decorated with a Medal of Independence, a medal reserved to those people who majorly contributed to the Turkish War of Independence. Kara Fatma's bravery and leadership earned her a place in Turkish history as a symbol of female empowerment and a role model for women in the military, something which, at least during the Ottoman Empire, had been unheard of until Kara Fatma's enlisting in 1919.
In summary, the role of women in Turkic societies has changed significantly over time, with periods of greater freedom and autonomy followed by periods of more restricted roles. The Ottoman Empire was a particularly low point for women's rights, but with the rise of modernization and political reform movements, women's roles have begun to shift again in recent decades.
In the next episode of this two-part series, we are going to analyze in extensive detail the impact of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's reforms in the new Republic of Türkiye, and also how women's rights changed in the subsequent decades up to the year 2023.
Until then, thank you for watching. You can support us over on Patreon and even become a member of our channel right here on YouTube. Khan's Den was founded and is owned by Emre Yavuz, who has also written a book about the first Göktürk Empire. Currently, he is preparing the release of his second book, about the Second Göktürk Empire. Keep an eye out.